You know Mike Elko, you know Texas A&M. I was out there last week, and we were there for the Missouri game, obviously, so I saw them at their very best so far under Mike Elko. But we were there Friday, and it's just so wild to get explained to you how much had to be undone there. I'm not talking about roster. They didn't have to go overhaul it like Dion did at Colorado. Not like that, but just when you have a guy who's been pretty tenured at a place like Jimbo was, you don't have to throw him under the bus or anything, but to explain how you transition from one guy to the other guy, especially when the previous guy wasn't cutting it, you talk about this web, and it's like you have to undo it, or a rubber band ball, and you have to undo it one rubber band at a time. And some of it's personnel, some of it's staff, some of it's culture, some of it's politics, and it can almost make you hesitant to take the job. Of course, it's A&M because you take the job. So things started the way they did there. Now you got Wigman back, and they have by far their most dominant performance of the year. Of course, irresponsibly, then that means a lot of folks start asking, could we be a one-loss team when we play Texas? Like, not learning from all the chaos around you, but that's okay. It's your constitutional right to look ahead. Teams don't need to, fans can. But in the grand scheme of things right now, I don't think the sky is the limit for that team. I still think that there's an imposed ceiling roster-wise, but it's a lot higher than number 15 in the country or whatever they are right now. So I think that team could find itself in the top 10. I think that team could do some special things this year. Long term, I just more and more by the day continue to be convinced, wow, they got the right guy, and wow, he's not going to be a superstar for quite a while. Like he's not a sexy hire, but probably the right hire, and then it just gets reinforced the more you're around it. So give me your 50,000 and then zoom in a little bit view on Texas A&M.
All right, so let's take some of these things that go along with what we just discussed, culture, and then other phrases or words that we hear that we don't ever really know if that means anything. And I'll tell you when it actually does mean something. So culture, buy-in, attitude, fit, all those things, right? And we never, like, there was no better fit for LSU to be the head coach than Ed Orgeron. I mean, the guy literally had to beg his father for money to get tickets, and they couldn't afford him to go to games when he was a kid there at Tiger Stadium. So that didn't work out. Here's when it does work out. Buy-in and fit work out when you can get your guys to do things full speed and they understand what they're doing. This is a little bit of what the issue was with Alabama. We can point to all the stuff around scheme, but when you're not playing fast and the effort cannot be what it needs to be to play at a high level, that's a problem with either the culture, the buy-in, or the fit, or maybe all of those. What Coach Elko has done is found guys that can be a good fit for what he wants to do, but not what he has to do. So he's going to do things that are a good fit for his players first. Then he's going to make sure they understand why they're doing it. Okay, so there comes the buy-in portion of that. When your guys know where to go, what to do, how to do it, how to get lined up, they're not looking left and right when they're trying to find out what the check was or when the tight end moves, what's the personnel grouping. It's just boom, boom, boom. You get lined up and then you go and you play full speed. That's what buy-in is to me. And then culture on top of that, I look at that as more the icing. So that's when guys come in and watch extra film on their own. That's when guys hold their teammates accountable. That's when you've watched so much or talked about so much that you understand it before your coaches even get to it. That's what I see a lot with Texas A&M right now. And to go a little bit of a step further, being very specific in your game plans. I thought the coolest part about Saturday, when you looked at those three upsets, well, and A&M was favored, but let's just say it was an upset happening that way. None of us really saw that coming. So for that one to go that way, for Arkansas to beat Tennessee and Vanderbilt to beat Alabama, none of those super fluky, by the way.
Yeah.
The reasons that they happened were the plans that were put in place. The stretch play was shut down on the second or third play of the game when Nick Scorton destroyed a tackle about 4 yards deep into the backfield. And all of a sudden, you aren't going to have the play that you need to build your offense around for the rest of the day. And then the amount of free runners that came on pressures was almost uncountable because it kept happening over and over and over again. Now, is Connor Wigman going to be that accurate every day? I don't know. Is Travis Williams going to run a 3-2-6 defense every week? No, he's not. But they put it in that week, and that specific plan worked. Same thing with Vanderbilt, knowing they needed to own time of possession and keep the best players that were involved in that game on the sideline. Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams, Tyler Booker, amongst others. So when you have buy-in along with your culture, and you can get your guys to go a little bit further with the understanding of how they're doing it and why they're doing it, which is the most important part, Then you play full speed and you use all that athletic ability that you have to be able to go out there and dominate. And that's what I saw from those teams, and it's what I'm seeing early on from Texas A&M.
Couple of other things I think are crazy here. I was in their weight room talking to Tommy Moffitt, who, for those of you who don't know, is at Texas A&M now. Guy says, this is actually the most fun I've ever had doing this. And it's the most fun because we got a guy in Mike Elko that has 100% wind in our sails to run a strength and conditioning program the way it's supposed to be run. And if you know anything about A&M, in the latter stages of the Jimbo era, you know that maybe the previous S&C staff wasn't really free to feel like they could do that, because anything that you ran up the ladder really wasn't going to get the full stamp of approval for the head man. And as a result, something that exists at the lower high school level kind of started to exist at the high level college level, and that is strength and conditioning just kind of voluntary. Like, yeah, everybody goes, but some of them are checked out after 30 minutes, and it's not really mandatory. That's not the case there anymore. And the other thing, and we got to go in a second, but the other thing, you have fun with this, if you will, and I'll talk to you about this when I get back from Oregon. I think the misconception, perhaps, is that Jimbo and A&M recruited at an extremely high level. I think numbers-wise and rankings-wise, that may be true. But if you go look at the NFL draft, and you go look at how poor they've performed there, even relative to the middle of the pack in the SEC, you start to learn a little something. The more you talk to scouting types and the more you talk to folks who know that program, the more you realize the misconception was they recruited a whole lot of high-level guys and then Jimbo didn't coach them up. Coaches will tell you Jimbo's actually a really, really good coach. It's that the guys they went and got, in many cases, they weren't beating Georgia for. They weren't beating Alabama for. So if you're landing 4- and 5-star guys, but you're not fighting the top schools for them, it may tell you a little something about those 4- and 5-star guys. That 2022 class, which was the highest rated of all time, is totally disintegrated. And a lot of them were character pieces, and a lot of them were just mis-evals, and not just on their end, but maybe on the recruiting industry's end in some cases. And in some cases in the recruiting industry, there are things about a guy from the neck up that you couldn't possibly know that makes your eval incomplete. And so now, not only is the evaluation piece and the developmental piece elite because they did it at Duke. They did it before he got there. So he brings those pieces and those aspects with him. But I also think they understand there's a little different way that you recruit A&M. I would almost say that is as much like an Ohio State as it is an LSU or an Ole Miss or an Alabama in the way they attract kids to campus and how they sell A&M. And you got a guy who understands it. So I know that it was nice to beat Missouri, but even if they had lost a dogfight to Missouri, there are so many green arrows that you get when you start to raise the hood on Texas A&M that I'm buying stock in them if anyone wants to sell stock. Your last words, sir, before we're out of here.
I would just tell all the things that you said with recruiting, and then once you get talent in place, I don't know if this is a word, but believability is what comes to my mind. And that goes back to putting guys on the field. Can you allow them to believe that what they're doing is going to work? Because I can promise you, there are a lot of college football players out there, Josh, that are just running plays. And they just think it should work because the coach told them it should work in practice one time against a scout team. But do you believe conceptually why that's going to work? A good example is where you're going this weekend. When you watch Oregon's defense, a lot of what they do is created. It's not just 5-stars everywhere. They have some good players, there's no doubt. But the precision in which they run their pressures and their movement and the understanding of, we're not just running this twist so hopefully one guy gets to make a play and there's no one on him. You have to pick it a certain way. You have to hug the other guy coming backside again just a certain way. And then when you do that, if the play is run correctly, even by the offense, we should still win because you believe that your effort and your technique will go work. I think some guys in recruiting come in and they just believe they're already that guy. That's one thing that's brilliant about Kirby Smart is he's been able to get the guys that coming out of high school were those guys to believe they're not the guys, and they got to go earn it, and they got to go prove it. Because he's had, look at the draft picks he's had, and they're still playing in bowl games, and they're still going out there and playing a different level of intense football because he forces them to believe that whatever they've already done is not enough, and whatever they've been told is not enough, and they better go prove it on the field or they're not going to get to where they want to go.